You are tuned into Be Bold Radio, breaking barriers over lives daily. This is the place for you to learn strategies and tools to turn your business, your dreams, and your goals into a reality. Thanks for tuning in to Be Bold Radio. This is your host, Demita B, and you're listening to episode number 126. In today's episode, we are talking about getting out of your own way. And I'm so honored to have our guest on this show today. Her name is Detra Trueheart. She's a speaker, preacher, author, and strategist. Detra is a faith mentor and life purpose generator to women, students, and leaders desiring to shift their beliefs and behaviors so they can transition from just doing work, ministry, and community well and start doing life well. Detra is the CEO of TrueheartSpeaks Enterprises, a lifestyle management and empowerment firm where she helps individuals get out of their own way and get to the business of living by showing them how to get quiet, get clear, get unstuck, and get started. Detra uses her more than 25 combined years of pageantry, performing arts, leadership, empowerment, and personal development expertise to become the go-to girl for life, purpose, faith, and women and girls empowerment. She is also the author of 30 Days of Thanks, 30 daily devotions for cultivating an attitude of gratitude, and founder of the Young Miss Buffalo Pageant, Scholarship and Enrichment Program Inc, an enrichment and leadership program for girls ages 13 through 17. Ladies and gentlemen of Be Bold Radio, please welcome Detra M. Trueheart.
Hi there.
Hello. Thanks so much for joining us on Be Bold Radio. You know, I'm most excited about this podcast because of what we're going to be talking about in this podcast about getting out of your own way. And so what I would like for you to do is just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so outside of what you heard on my bio, I am genuinely a lover of people, and I love warm PJs. I love Rottweilers, and I love tea, as I'm drinking right now. I love all things warm, and so the crazy thing is I live in Buffalo, New York, and it's not always cold here, but you would think that I would be somewhere like in Miami or somewhere, where it could be hot all the time. But outside of that, I am really on an assignment in this season, to help women and leaders get out of their own way and step into the full place that God has called them to be, fully, authentically, unapologetically. And so when you are in my space, you understand that about me. I love family. I love people, but I'm also in a space where I have just decided that I will not tolerate anything that stands in the way of me being who God has called me to be, going where God has called me to go, saying what God has called me to say, and sharing that with the people who God has assigned to me.
Wow, I really love that. And what it sounds like to me, that's purpose. That's what it truly means to live out your purpose.
It takes a little bit of time to get there, as you probably, can attest. Like, you get to a point where you says, you know what, it's all or nothing. It's now or never. And, it's kind of like, there's a saying that says, like, what if I fail? And it says, but what if you fly? And so I think that we just have to get to that point, and we understand that we all have an assignment and that we all have to step into it. And that our roles, your role and my role, is to help to facilitate and be the catalyst to help push people into that space that they need so that they can confidently walk in who God has called them to be.
That's very true, Detra. And, earlier this year, I had an opportunity to attend the Oprah's 2020 Vision Tour, and she had us focus on one word for this year. One word that we were going to focus on, and my word was intentional. Just being intentional with relationships, being intentional with conversations, being intentional with my day-to-day activities. What is it? Does this serve a purpose? And does this serve my purpose on earth? Just being very strategic and intentional about what I choose to do throughout the day and throughout 2020. And speaking of intention, what compelled you? Can you say, what is it that compelled you to get started in what you do?
You know what? I think the compelling was the Holy Spirit for me. God and I have this really weird relationship, and so let me start kind of like from the beginning. So I have about 20 plus years of working with youth, and so my initial impact was to be a motivational speaker for youth, and because that was my background, program development, workshop facilitating, being in schools and in the community as a speaker. But my very first kind of aha moment was I used to compete in pageants, and I competed for about 7 or 8 years nationally across the country. And I was also part of the Miss America system. And I had won my first title, which was Miss Buffalo back in 1997. And I remember speaking in front of a group of 7th and 8th graders at my elementary school. And I remember the fire just lit. I had wanted to be a lawyer like ever since I had known. Like I just knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I love Matlock, and so I was going to be a lawyer. and
Wow.
and when I was in front of the students, I don't know, and most people can kind of agree, and they agree that like there's that moment where you're like, this is it. I knew that that was it. Like I had never experienced it before. I didn't even know how to make money doing it. I just knew because back then we're looking at like Les Brown, Zig Ziglar. I don't even know if there were women who were making the kind of money, or at least known women. But my goal back then was kind of like, I'm going to be, the black female Les Brown, because that's all I knew.
Right.
But I didn't know, because there weren't many people making money doing that. I had no clue how to do it. And so the initial goal was literally just I wanted to continue to empower youth, because I was in the process of creating my nonprofit, the Young Miss Buffalo Pageant. And as time went on, through the work that I was doing with my girls and the personal development stuff and the life mastery stuff that I was creating, God was kind of moving me into a space and setting me up to also do work with women and leaders. And so that is kind of like how the initial start happened, was in front of a group of 7th and 8th graders, and the fire lit, and it hasn't gone out since. Like I just know, and I had always been on stage because I had been dancing since I was 3, so I was never a stranger to the stage. It just when I got on the stage and I opened my mouth, and it was like when the two connected, it was like that's it.
Yes, that's an amazing feeling. It's an amazing feeling to be doing what God has truly called you to do. Normally, something that comes natural to you, something that God has innately put on the inside of you to do well, is what's connected to your purpose. And I just truly believe that it's never easy. It's never easy, but God, He has graced all of us to do something amazing. And so it's an amazing feeling to be truly doing something that God has assigned for you to do.
It is an amazing feeling, and it's funny because I was on I guess what you would call a live podcast last night. It was called Sassy Sessions, and we were talking about the relationship of self. And we happened to just be talking about how collaboration and just being, it were 3 of us together talking about this, the host, and then there was myself and another young lady who happens to be a friend, a sister, and a mentee of mine. And the conversation came up about, for me, I said, even though I do it with ease, it doesn't mean that it's easy. Right. And so people can look at what you do, and because you have the grace to do it, they assume, like, especially when they are not clear on what they're supposed to be doing, that, oh, well, since she makes it look so easy, I can do it. And they say, don't mistake grace and ease with the easiness of doing it. It's just that I'm anointed to do this and you're not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, people don't realize that there's a difference between your passion to do something and being anointed to do something. Just because I love to sing does not mean that I'm anointed to sing, and many times people, they confuse the two. So they end up doing something that they may be passionate about, but not anointed for. And it can be a dangerous a dangerous thing to be living out your passion but not your anointing. There is a true difference. A few years ago I wrote a book called Press Through Your Mess, and the subtitle was Getting Out of Your Own Way. And some of the things we talked about in the book about getting out of your own way was, us being paralyzed by our excuses. We have to learn how to, pick up our bed and walk. We are the ones holding us back from the things that God has truly called us to do. So what does it mean to you? And share with our audience, about what you talk about, the meaning of getting out of our own way and how we can master getting out of our own way.
Well, getting out of your own way really means acknowledging anything that's keeping you from taking that next best step. And so, and 9 times out of 10, it's you, right? And so it's your fears. It could be procrastination. It could be generational curses or breakthroughs or strongholds. Like there could be certain things that you've been through. So maybe you've gone through something and you know that God is calling you to share it, but you're in your own way because you're afraid of what people are going to think. You're afraid that people are going to judge you. You're afraid that if I say this, that people are going to look at me, in a different light from what they knew before they knew that about me. And so one of the ways that I teach, there's multiple ways, but basically the steps that I teach is I'm teaching you to get quiet. I teach you to get clear. I teach you to get focused. I teach you to get moving so that you can get out of your own way, right? And so sometimes you gotta remove all of the distractions. You gotta sit with yourself. You gotta sit in that thing, and you gotta do the work, right? And so acknowledging what exactly it is that you're afraid of, acknowledging what exactly. Because sometimes we don't even know what we're afraid of. Like it's like, well, what are you afraid of? And it's like, well, I don't know. I said, well, then if you don't really know what you're afraid of, then why aren't you moving? I don't know. And so then having those questions about, well, what do you think is going to happen when you take that next best step, right? And so sometimes it's just fear of failure, right? I think that like it may not work out the way that I wanted it to. Sometimes it's fear of success, right? So I'm afraid that like if I do this and it goes well, I don't know what to do after that. Right, I might mess it up. And so there are multiple avenues and multiple ways that we kind of deal with that depending upon what the answers and the processes are. But the very first thing that I really teach, and the essence of really getting out of your own way, is getting quiet, right? You got to be able to hear clearly what God is saying and where he is taking you and what he is telling you to do. And so a lot of times getting quiet allows you to also weed out the voices that should not be talking, right? And so we're biblically, it says, God says, Jesus says, my sheep know my voice, they hear me, and they come unto me, right? They do what I say, right? And those who don't know me, they I don't acknowledge them, right? And so when we're in that space, if God is talking to us but we're listening to what everybody else is saying, getting quiet allows you to tap into that. Getting quiet allows you to master spending the time that is necessary on a consistent basis with the one who you need to be hearing, so that when he speaks you can identify his voice.
Now that is so true. Being a mom of 3 children, it's very important at this time in my life that I get quiet before God, because I need his direction. I need his instruction. I need his wisdom. And it's so important that I get quiet before him. And not only just to be a mother, but to be an effective entrepreneur, and to make sure that I'm giving my authentic self to those who are mentored under me, and those who come to me for wisdom and come to me for advice and come to me for direction, so it's important that I get quiet before God. So those listening, there are some listening that I'm sure they don't know how to get quiet. Explain or share with us a few tips on how we can get quiet to hear God's voice and to get clarity in our life.
One of the ways that I think is most important is, and I actually teach this in my quiet time training. So if you're like, oh, you know what, I need this in my life, like she just gave me something, but I need more, it's all on my website. You can go to TrueheartSpeaks.com and go to my online store and go to my quiet time training. But one of the things that I teach is that you've got to schedule it in. The same way you schedule your hair appointment, your nail appointment, your massage appointment, your dentist appointment, your kids' appointments, whoever's appointments, right? You have to schedule it in. It has got to be a part of your lifestyle. It cannot just be oh, I'm getting quiet just so I can hear, so I can do this thing. It is, I have to get quiet so that I can live. It's got to be part of your lifestyle. And so when you're looking at your schedule and you're looking at, okay, where do I fit that? Where can I fit it in? Sometimes that means you have to wake up a little bit earlier. Sometimes that means maybe you got to stay up a little bit later to get that in. Sometimes you might need to not go out to eat, go into your car and sit, right? Or let everybody else leave the office and sit in your space so that you can be quiet. Right. And so those are, for me, the biggest thing is deciding when you're going to get quiet, and then also deciding where you're going to get quiet. Right. And so if you can say, okay, well, I'm going to get up, an extra 15 or 20 minutes, and I'm going to the bathroom, and that's my quiet time. Right. I don't assume that you got a prayer room or a war room or whatever the case may be, or I'm leaving an extra couple of minutes early. And so, or on the drive home, that is my quiet time, right? And so if I can afford to take an extra 20 or 30 minutes to drive home before I get home, but you have to take some time, look at your schedule, find out where you have pockets of time, because sometimes that hour that you spend on social media is the time that you could be spending getting quiet. That time that you spend, scrolling Instagram or watching IGTV, like them videos pop up, and next thing you know, it's 20 minutes later. It's got to be scheduled in. Like, God has to be a priority, and the reality is we want God to make our issues a priority, but we won't make him a priority.
That is so true.
Yeah, and I will add this, that as a mom, I have an 8-year-old, and so I can imagine what it's like for moms who have multiple kids. When your kids get a certain age, you teach them. Like there's a saying that says we teach people how to treat us, how to love us, how to respect us, all that kind of stuff. And so at the end of the day, you have to teach your kid. If your kids are old enough and you can come home and say, listen, I'm getting ready to go into my room. I'm going to be in there for about 15 minutes. Put your timer on, or whatever the case may be. It's kind of like you have to take an important phone call and you say, hey, I got to take this call. I'm getting ready to go in here. Don't interrupt me. That it's the same exact thing. Like, my son is old enough now. Like, when he was younger, I had to figure it out. Right. And it was hard. Because they come in the bathroom, like wherever you are, you turn around, they right there on your big toe.
Oh my
like,
God.
just, you're like, what in the world?
Tell
So
me about
for
it.
me, I learned even now, like, he knows, like, I have a prayer space. And so when I come in, if he comes into my prayer space, he knows not to talk. And I don't tell him he can't come in, but he knows, like, that's my quiet time. Like, that's my quiet time. Don't come in here asking me a million questions. You sit down and you let me finish doing what I got to do. Right. And so you have to teach people how to respect those spaces of your time and of your life, because guess what? You are also, as a mom, right, and the dads, if there's some men who are listening, you have a responsibility also to model what you want your kids to do when they get to the age of accountability. You are also teaching them what it looks like to make God a priority. You're teaching them what it looks like to get quiet, why it's important. And even to some extent, you can include them in that and say, listen, for the next 5 minutes, it's no nothing. Everybody, to put your cell phones down, put them away. I'm collecting them. We're going to have some quiet time, and they're going to spaz out on you. But guess what? You get the opportunity to set the stage about how you want things to move forward in the future. You can absolutely do that. Because here's what I've noticed is, over the years, like, there's certain things that I remember growing up that I didn't see. And so I had to create my own normal, and I had to decide what was important for me. And a lot of times, if we saw it, right, growing up, then we thought, okay, well, that's the way you do things. But just because you saw it doesn't make it right. And just because you didn't see it doesn't make it wrong. And so sometimes you have to decide, well, I didn't see that, but I know that this is what I need. And so again, for me, I want my son to know that, well, no, my mom took time out for herself. Like, I don't ever want him to, when he gets to a point of dating and he gets to a point, where he gets married, if he decides to get married, that, he takes his wife or the young lady that he's dating for granted. And he's like, oh, well, no, like, I want him to already be trained that women take time out for themselves, that he has permission to even take time out for himself, that I don't have to be around you 24/7, or when I am, that there is a point in time in my life where I need to recharge. And so I didn't see that, right? And so I had to learn how to make that decision and create that normal for myself. And so you have to give yourself permission to create some things that you may have never saw, but it works for you, and it's necessary for you, and it's also necessary for the generations to come behind you.
You said a mouthful right there. You know what? We're going to transition into the next phase of our of our podcast. And this is basically within 5 minutes. I want to ask you these quick questions right off of the top of your head. Give me the answers to these quick questions. So the first one is, what is the first 90 days of your day like? Like, how does your day start?
It's my quiet time. God has had me probably on the last few, I don't know, it hasn't been a year yet, but it's been within at least 6 or more months, waking up at 6 a.m. And so I'm up at 6 a.m. and it varies, but within that time frame, I could be journaling, I could be worshiping, I could be praying, I could be reading my Bible, or all of the above. And it really just depends on what I'm led to do in that moment. But the first 90 minutes of my day, from like 6 to 7:30, before I wake my son up to get him ready for school, because I take him to school and I drop him off and pick him up. So that literally is what that looks like. Even if it's 5 minutes, because some people say, well, I don't have 90 minutes, but you have 5 minutes.
90 minutes.
There's an exercise in my quiet
Absolutely.
time training that's called the power of a minute. And I literally make you sit in silence for a minute. And then what I tell you to do is I tell you to multiply that times 5. And most people, when they understand the power of a minute, like when you sit silent for 60 seconds and you're not doing anything, you're like, dang, like that actually seemed like a lot of time. For those people who are busybodies, sometimes it's an anxious time. And so it seems like it goes by fast because you're thinking about everything but being quiet. But my goal is to teach you and to train you, to train your mind and your body and your spirit to settle itself, so that as 1 minute grows to 5 minutes, 5 minutes grows to 10 minutes, 10 minutes grows to 15, 15 grows to 30, 30 grows to 60, 60 grows to 90. Right. And so then you create this rhythm, and that's with anything, right? When we're creating new habits. So I think, don't get discouraged if you're like 90 minutes, child, I ain't got that. And I'm like, you don't have to have that. But if you have 5, shut everything off and be intentional with practicing and doing it every day until you master it, and then increase it.
Okay, well, speaking of habits, what is one habit you wish you had?
Well, it's crazy that that guy wakes me up at 6 in the morning, but he really doesn't. I have to set an alarm, and so I really wish I was a morning person. I am a night owl, and so motherhood has kind of, it changes just, when you doing so much that normally for me, before I had my son, like my prime work hours were probably like 10 p.m. to like 2 a.m. And so now sometimes, child, I be sleep at 10 o'clock. And so it's not even happening, right? My eyes is closing before I get him to sleep. So, but I really do sometimes wish I was a morning person where I could, some people get up at like 3 in the morning and they're, and I understand that it takes rhythm and, but some people are just morning people. I am not a morning person. Like it takes me a minute to just, kind of like get into the groove of things. And then once I'm into it, I done had some tea, I done just had my talk with God time, then I'm good.
I like that. I like that. Now, for this third question, what is one thing that you wish you knew when you started in entrepreneurship and business?
Nobody talks about saving your money and being ready to invest. So when you start a business, you think, oh, like I'm gonna get out here, I'm gonna start this business, I'm gonna get my little logo, I'm gonna tell everybody about it. But you don't know that you need money for a website, that you need money, depending upon what you're doing. And so my business is in evolution right now. So a lot of what I do is like online, but even just like a computer, you need internet, you need equipment, and so people don't tell you, like when you're starting your business, that you need money. Like people think, oh, I'm gonna start a business so I can get some money, child. You need, and here's the thing: some people will say you don't need money to make money, and you don't. But at the end of the day, there are some things that people can do and they can sell it without making money. But at the end of the day, when you are trying to up level, and let's just say there's a conference that you want to go to, or something that, and you have not allotted, like you need to have a stash of money that is specifically professional development, business related, that you can tap into when you want to go to conferences, when you want to invest in a coach, when you want to invest in any of those sorts of things. Even when it deals with like personal development, I'm teaching my people now the importance of having a personal development fund. Like you need that, right? So whether it's therapy, whether it's coaching, whatever the case may be, some people can't invest in it because they don't have the money for it. And they don't value it. Value the investment. If you want people to invest in you, then you need to invest in you. And we don't talk about that.
That's so
We
good.
just don't talk about it. And so people come in with a poverty and a lack mentality. And I'll be honest, like I started out like that. Like I didn't think I was, but there are things that I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to pay for that. And it's like, but you want people to pay for your stuff. So your
That is
perspective
so
has to
true.
change. There has to be a mindset shift across the board. But save your coins, child. So be clear about what you need, so that even if something shows up that you don't need, you're disciplined enough to say no, and you're just not spending money for the sake that you because you have it.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
So there were a couple of things. I went through these questions and I like wrote a couple things down, and I said, you had it all along. There was nothing wrong with you. You were set apart and different for a reason. It was intentional.
Yes, you were set apart for a reason and it was intentional. My goodness. My goodness. Oh, okay. Well, let's go to the next question. My goodness. What is the best advice that you have received?
Um, there's a few things with that too. I had don't worry about them. You'll have nothing to prove. And it's okay to start over.
What inspires you to do what you do?
I would say change lives and seeing people live instead of just exist. I notice that we settle, and sometimes we don't even know that we're settling. And so I think the thing that really just inspires me is knowing that that my voice has impact, and that the anointing that I carry changes people. And so I think that that is what inspires me to do what I do, because I don't want to sit on what I have, and I want to be able to present myself to God empty.
Okay, next question. What book are you currently reading?
So I'm normally reading a whole lot of books, but in this season, I have been diving a lot more into the Bible. So that's kind of like what I'm reading, but on the side, I'm listening to Believe Bigger by Marshawn Evans Daniels in Audible.
I just told my husband that, Detra, I feel like this season in my life, I'm becoming more of a student like never before for his word. I'm just hungry more for his word. And so, I think this in this season, the more that we find out what's available for to us, the more power we have. How do we know unless we read his word, unless we study more and become a student of God's word? So that's funny that you mentioned that you've been reading, the Bible even more. That's been the book that you've been reading. And, because my time is just so valuable, and because I wear many hats, it's kind of good for me to listen to audible books, because, hey, I'm still getting it, I'm still getting the information. So, yeah.
I also understand that He shifted my mantle. And so I understand that I also have to be ready. And so whereas I spent a lot of time reading other books, I have to dive into the word because I need it for me, because I understand that in the season, when the time comes, I'm going to be pouring out more. And I want to, like you said, I need that deeper understanding, right? I need that deeper understanding. There's so much in the word that we just do not know. And we're, to some extent, like we say we love God and we believe God, but we're walking around here, child, crazy, and we don't know nothing. And it's like,
Right.
you say you love God, but you don't really know him. You know of him. You know of him from what you experienced at church and what you have heard other people talk about, and maybe even what he has done in your life, because God doesn't necessarily have to require you to be reading his word for him to do anything for you. And you can say, God, like, God did this for me, but for you to go deeper and really get the context and the understanding of who he is when he did what he did for you, you got to be in the word.
That's so true. Very true. Man, let's go to the next question. The next question is, what is that thing that you're just not good at? What is that one thing you just know you are not good at?
Organizing. I am a visionary to the T. Like, I can give you the vision, but I just, girl, it's organized chaos. And once I get it organized, like I got my little papers. Do not touch my papers, because I know where the one paper that I need in my stack of papers. But if you move it, now I'm mad, because I'm like, doggone it, I knew it was right there. I got to figure out where it is. Move it.
Yes.
So yes,
Yes.
I'm working on it. I really am. But I recognize that ain't my thing. I could tell you what to do, but you need to organize it.
Okay, last question. What is one thing that you want people to remember about you?
I think more importantly that I was intentional with helping people become their best self. Like I didn't let people settle. I think most people who know me will say that that she cared, she loved, she showed up, and more importantly, she let me know that I could be more than what I thought I could be.
That's good. That's good. Well, unfortunately, our podcast is coming to an end, and I've learned so much on this podcast. And man, I mean, it was really, really, really
It
good. The
was.
conversation was good. Well, I want you to tell us more about your products, your books and services, or any upcoming events that you have going on. Also, tell our listeners how they can connect with you.
The first thing that I mentioned, which is weird because I didn't technically mean to, it wasn't one of the products that I was going to mention, is my quiet time training. And so if you listen to the podcast and what we talked about kind of resonated with you, I would encourage you to go to trueheartspeaks.com/quiet time to take advantage of my audio training. And there's a reflective workbook that you can kind of work through, but basically you can listen to it over and over and over again. It's $27, and you can just kind of take it, write down the steps of the things that I'm talking to you about quiet time, why it's important. The other thing is I am enrollment for my Push Into Purpose 4-week masterclass has now opened, and this week, I'm not sure when people will get this, but it launches March 3rd of 2020. And so depending upon when you are listening to this podcast, if it is within this time frame, the pricing will vary. And so we are in the early bird pricing of $97 right now. And so you can go to trueheartspeaks.com/PN2P. That's the letter P, the letter N is in Nancy, the number 2, and the letter P is in Paul, to register for that. And it really is a lot of people say, I want to walk in my purpose. I want to know what my purpose is. And so before you can do any of that, there's some things that you got to push into. And so you got to press past your fears. You got to learn what it takes to unlock your gifts, your talents, and your call. You got to learn how to stay in your lane. And then the last thing that I talk about is helping you help others push, right? And so there's kind of like this pay it forward piece. And so if that is something that resonates with you, where you're in a space where you're like, I know that where I am is not where I want to be and not where I need to be, and I do need a push, then I would encourage you to check that out and and register, right? The other thing is I do have a book. It's called 30 Days of Thanks, 30 Daily Devotions for Cultivating an Attitude of Gratitude. It's $15. You can get it on my website at trueheartspeaks.com/book, or it's also at Barnes & Noble's online and Amazon. And so I do have an accompanying journal that you can get with it that is also $15. If you order it directly on my website at trueheartspeaks.com/book, you can get it for $25, and then I would sign it and mail it to you. And then I think that might be it. There's some other things that I have going on. I have a goal of booking 30 podcasts in 30 days. They don't necessarily need to happen in 30 days, but the goal is me being intentional with helping people show up, helping people get out of their own way, and really just kind of sharing this message of even just embracing silence and gratitude and thanks. And so if you're listening and you have a podcast, or you know someone who has a podcast, and maybe what I shared on this podcast resonated with you and you think that it will be a good fit, feel free to email me at info@trueheartspeaks.com, info@trueheartspeaks.com. And just so you know, it's TrueheartSpeaks.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, SoundCloud, YouTube. I'm mainly on Facebook and Instagram, and you can find me at facebook.com/TrueheartSpeaks, or look me up on Instagram under TrueheartSpeaks. And those are the basic ways to connect with me. When you go to my website, on the very first page, if you scroll down a little bit, I do have a free training. It's called 3 Ways to Get Out of Your Own Way Today. It's like a 15-minute mini masterclass. Just put your name and your email in and you'll get that. And that'll actually give you a start to getting out of your own way. And I think that is all.
Well, I know, like myself, the audience have gotten so much from this podcast. And as always, until next time, continue to believe, be original, and live your dreams. Are you a leader, entrepreneur, author, or speaker? Did you have a lifestyle change that you want to share with the world? Do you have some helpful health tips that could change our life? Well, be a guest on the Be Bold Radio Show. Email us at beboldradio@gmail.com. Again, that's beboldradio@gmail.com.